Hey there, welcome to Mark in the Park, the podcast. I'm your host, Mark Milow, speaker, storyteller, and healthcare advocate. And this is the place for personal reflections, stories about mindset, hobbies, and purpose. And a reminder that life doesn't stop at a diagnosis. In fact, often the real journey begins after. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Mark in the Park podcast. And I am so excited today. I have a special guest that I know through the Parkinson's Foundation, Kathleen Blake, who we also know as Kathy Blake. And Kathy, thank you so much for being on the show today. You have got some great stuff to tell us, and I just can't wait to dig into the conversation today.
Well, I really appreciate you inviting me. I'm excited, and let's take it. Let's go with it.
Awesome. Now, my brother was asking me who's going to be on the podcast this week, and I told him there's somebody that I admire and respect so much because she's got so much medical knowledge. She's served as a doctor, was on medical boards, and she's so smart. But she dumbs things down so I can understand it. And my brother laughed and said, you need that. So there you go.
God, he's not nice. Send him to me. I'll talk to him.
It's my brother. So, but yeah. So, if you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your family, whatever you want to tell us, but also maybe bring us into your work as a doctor.
Sure. So I am the only girl in a family that has 3 boys. So that kind of says everything in my mind. Straight shooters, really lots of conversation. I used to think that I really needed a sister, but I am blessed with my 3 brothers. And I also grew up in a family with my dad who really admired women professionals. So his expectations for me and for my brothers were identical. So we find out what we wanted to do it, and be successful. So I think that made a huge difference. And then the third part really was that he acknowledged over and over again that my mom was the smartest person in the family. He did not claim that title. And she probably was. She was an economist until she got married to my dad and they had children. So that's kind of the background. I became captivated by chemistry and physics when I was in high school. Before that, I was going to be a journalist, or I was going to go into the Foreign Service, which is what my dad had done for really all of his career. But this amazing, inspirational teacher said, your brain really works in this way. You should really think about chemistry or physics. So, lo and behold, got a physics major. That's where I met my husband at an orientation the first week of college for the physics department. So it was good for that. But I realized in the course of time that I wanted to not just be in a laboratory. I wanted to be working with people. And medicine seemed like the natural sort of profession direction for me to follow. But medicine is about physics, and particularly cardiology. And so I became a cardiologist because it was very familiar with how my brain worked. And I can tell you, Mark, that I never, ever thought that everything that I did professionally in cardiology, in public health, working with medical societies, running a big medical practice, it never occurred to me that I would call upon all of those experiences once I got involved with the Parkinson's community, because I have Parkinson's, and once I got involved with the Parkinson's Foundation. But I was wrong. I think every single day that the things that I did to help prevent heart disease, those are the same approaches that work to prevent Parkinson's. The things I can do to promote optimal clinic visits, well, that was my life for 30 years of seeing patients and realizing how complex those visits could be. And so, did I want to have Parkinson's? Of course not. I mean, nobody does. But when you have it, I think you have a choice. And the choice is, are you going to make the most of it and do the best you can for as long as you can? Or are you going to have what I call with myself the occasional pity party, which is allowed to last for about 15 minutes, and then it's over. Then I got to get to work. So that's maybe my background. Hopefully that tells people who I am.
Well, I'm happy to notice that in your schooling, your online profile on LinkedIn, that
Yeah.
you went into physics first, and I thought, wow, that's interesting, going from physics into the medical field. That's when my brother said, "Yeah, she's too smart for you, Mark." I was like, "Okay, whatever." But
That's not true. That is not
but
true, Mark.
well, as a
But
cardiologist,
physics and medicine go together. And
yeah,
actually, in cardiology, there are a lot of people who are either in physics or electrical engineering,
hmm,
because a lot of what we do, true in cardiology, but true also in neurology now, has to do with medical devices that oftentimes are electrical medical devices. So the pacemakers that I put in for years kind of served as a construct for
hmm.
how to do electronic medical devices for Parkinson's. So I just see it as all part of one thing.
That is amazing. That was my going to be my question. How do those really tie in? And there you go. You answered that question. That is fantastic. Um, Go
And
ahead.
part of what you know a lot about is the whole area of narrative medicine and the whole area of how do we tell our stories and how do those stories resonate? Maybe not with everybody, but with people who have Parkinson's like we do. And I think that there can be a feeling of intimidation sometimes when you're in the medical environment.
Hmm,
You feel like kind of a fish out of water. But I do think that having the background of knowing, I may not know stuff. In fact, there's a lot I don't know about Parkinson's, but I did learn how to ask questions. And I think that that's something, if I could have one thing that people could learn how to do as a result of our work through the foundation, tell their story, the narrative medicine that you've been working with so much with Dr. Montry, but also how to ask questions.
awesome. Great point. It's funny. Um, I was doing some public speaking for the Parkinson's Foundation out here in the Southwest, and
Yeah.
a couple of the staff members said something similar to what you were saying about being prepared through your life, through your medical experiences to work with Parkinson's. Well,
Yes.
I've been a public speaker. I've been an instructor. I've worked in front of groups for years. And a couple of the staff members out here in the Southwest were like, it's like you've been getting prepared your whole life for this role.
No
And you just go,
question.
yeah, you
Yes.
just like, wow, okay, let's take
And what
advantage of
it
this, right?
says is at a time when you might be demoralized or feeling, like I say, the 15-minute pity party has
Yes.
is taking place at your house, that you then say, wait, 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 wait. I have a lot that I can still do.
Yep.
And I think that it is manifest in what you're doing, but really in what everybody on the advisory council to the foundation is doing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And you mentioned the Parkinson's Foundation. What led you to work with the Parkinson's Foundation? That's where you and I know each other, but what led you
Right.
to work with them?
Well, so I was first diagnosed in November of 2017,
Okay.
and my doctor made the diagnosis, my movement disorder specialist, and first question out of my mouth was, I said, "So how sure are you really that I have Parkinson's?" Oh God. And she said to me, "I'm about 90+% sure," which I think is her way of saying, "I'm sure you'll become sure." But at that point, I didn't know very much about it at all because I had seen people with Parkinson's in my clinical practice. Believe it or not, I had diagnosed a few. But they were, for the most part, people with the classic 4 signs or symptoms, the slowing down, the stiffness, excuse me, but the classic symptoms. And so I thought, I really have to look this stuff up. And one of the first things I did was I asked my doctor, but I asked other people, where can you get credible information about Parkinson's, because if you go online and you listen, there is so much stuff. You could doom scroll all day long and you don't know what
And
it
I
means
did.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is really, it's painful, it's not
Yeah.
productive. And so I went, amongst other places, I went to the Parkinson's Foundation for information. And what I found is that because they focus on both the person with Parkinson's, but also their care partners and their family, that it was really good, not just for me, but for the rest of my family. And the second thing I really liked about it was that even though I'm a doctor, I need someone to talk to me about Parkinson's in plain English. Really simple. Here are these medicines. Here's what you need to watch for. Because, yes, I too could read a package insert and say, holy schmoly, like, why? Why would anybody ever take this drug? Well, guess what? It helped to take that drug. So it was real practical. I call it the news you can use and the news that you need, like right now. I did not need, I still, fortunately, I think I don't need the sort of long-term, information of what things might be like in 10 years, because actually I'm still hoping there'll be better therapies in 10 years. But so I was a consumer, I was a beneficiary of that. Then, because you're on the email list, you get this email that says, we are recruiting for the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council. And it talked about the council. It turned out I knew somebody in Santa Fe, which is where I live, who had been on the council. So I talked to her. And I still remember her saying to me, because she was the widow of someone who had had Parkinson's, and Karen said to me, you go on that council and you are not window dressing. You are there to work. You are there to give advice. And she said, and you will be astonished at how responsive they are to that input. I was like, gee, well, that sounds good. So then I looked at the application. It's 3 questions. It's still, I think, 3 questions, basically. 1,500 words, no more than that. And I should say right now, I know we were going to talk about it later, but the deadline for applications is, I believe, April 10th.
Yes.
Do not let that deadline scare you. You can do this in an afternoon. Tell us what you care about. Tell us the gaps that you see in maybe your community or your world and how you think those could be solved. Because that's how we figure out what perspectives are needed, and that's how we recruit to the council. So that's how I got involved. I was a grateful recipient who then became an activist.
Nice. Very nice. And to your point, I'll just reiterate that. So the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council is taking applications up until April 10th. And
Yes.
if it is open to people with Parkinson's or care partners of people with Parkinson's. And
Right.
that's where Kathy and I know each other. And for the listeners out there, if you're interested, go to the Parkinson's Foundation website and just you can type in
Yes.
PPAC or PPAC for People with Parkinson's Advisory Council.
Right.
And that, like she said, it's an easy, simple way to apply. But I have to say, this is my mark my words for this week, because this is something so very, very important. I did not know what I was getting into when I joined PPAC, but I told the person that nominated me, I'm really not interested in fluff. I'm just not.
Right.
I want to make a difference. And when I got into PPAC, I have been involved in things I never really thought I
So
would be
many
involved in.
things.
Yes.
Yes.
And for the listeners out there that don't know this, the Parkinson's Foundation actually has it baked into their bylaws that they would have this group of people with Parkinson's or their caregivers to filter and screen things through to make sure that they're on target and on track with people with Parkinson's. And I love that philosophy. And I've said it before, no foundation is perfect. Every foundation has its flaws, whatever. But I will tell you, the Parkinson's Foundation listens to feedback, as you were just saying. They listen, they take note, and they really want to hear what people have to say, and they do take action on it. And so, if anybody's interested, get out there and get applying, because it is a commitment. It's time, it's energy, but you meet some of the most wonderful people in the world. And for me, that was one of the people I met was you. And again, I have
Oh,
told you before, you've been such a wonderful leader. But for those that don't know, Kathy's actually our president of our PPAC committee, leading
chair.
things.
I am not a president.
Oh, sorry, sure, yes, but you're leading us and guiding us, and it's so wonderful. But I just wanted, I'll leave it at that. If you're
Yeah.
interested, make sure you get out there and apply. April 10th is the deadline, and I just wanted to make sure I reemphasize that. So thank you, Kathy, about that very much. So
Well, so actually too, so don't be afraid by our enthusiasm. Don't let that put you off, because sometimes you say, "Oh my God, they're going to ask me to work like 100 hours a week." Not at
yeah,
all. There is one monthly Zoom meeting that really is the core of what we do. People bring topics, staff bring topics early in development, and they ask for our guidance. And then the other piece is one in-person meeting per year, typically tied to one of the quality conferences that the foundation is hosting. And then the thing that I think is a change, I'm told it's a change, but I think it's a really good one, is that of the 15 members on the council, we interview them, of course, to join the council, but then we interview them again once they're on the council, and we ask them, what are you really passionate about? And what we then do is kind of a matchmaking, where we try to match someone's skills, experience, passions with the various programs. I'll give an example. One of the people on the council, her family has identified a genetic abnormality. About 12 to 15% of people with Parkinson's, there is a gene abnormality that then may affect other members of the family. Her experience finding out about that was very painful. So, guess who we put on the group, working with the group that does gene related assessment? Because we now have over 30,000 people who've had their genomes assessed. And we didn't want to just hear kumbaya. We actually really wanted to hear, what could we do better?
yes,
So,
yes.
just an example.
That's a great example, and thank you. I mentioned, keeping me busy, but again, that's really up to you. Like Kathy was saying, they'll pair you up in projects that you want to work in. But you know me, Kathy, I'm an obsessive, and they paired me up with newly diagnosed, because that's
Yes,
such a passion of mine. And
great.
I was on the panel of the group that redesigned the information for newly diagnosed and things like that.
Great.
And it I was as busy as I wanted to be, because I was requesting more, and that's me. I just dive into everything. But to your point, they do a very good job of bringing people together in areas that they feel passionate about, and I love that. And the people are so wonderful. It's so great. It has truly become a family to me. Absolutely.
Well, and it's also something where I will say, so then you say, okay, great. How long am I on the council? Am I on it for like the rest of my life? No, the terms are 3 years long. However, we've just established an alumni council, and it will, in similar but not identical, not redundant ways, it is going to advise the foundation, because what we realize is we benefit from the information at a particular point in someone's life, typically when they have the energy to do things more actively. But what we want to know is, what can we do to make life better for people in the more advanced stages of the disease? And so I think this alumni council, which just met for the first time about 2 weeks ago, it's going to have a lot to offer to all of
Mm,
us. So,
that is amazing. That's wonderful.
yeah.
Now, I also noticed in your tenure in your history that you have a lot of involvement with policy making or policy committees,
Right.
whatnot, and with that, listening to you give your input about different policies and decisions is wonderful because you have a way of weaving the words together. I think because of that experience, and again, you can make these some of these more elaborate policies a little more understandable for us, which is great. But another thing I wanted to bring up was you had a chance recently, speaking of policy, to actually go to Washington D.C. And talk about policy with some of our policymakers. You want to
Yeah.
share a little bit about that?
Well, so we were both there, and there were a number of other people, I think maybe 7 active members of PPAC and a number of the alumni. And I'm sure we might have missed counting a few folks, but I'm going to go back a bit. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Okay,
Okay.
my dad was a diplomat, and we lived in and out of the country. But my life was surrounded by people who dealt with difficult problems. And it's interesting to me that my oldest brother became a diplomat. My next brother became a cinematographer, but later a labor union negotiator. And my youngest brother became a finance guy, but he figured out how to manage, you might say, financial arrangements that had gone bad.
Hmm.
And I think we got that from the dinner table. I'll be quite honest. That was what life was like in our house.
Wow.
And then someone would say, it's time to do the dishes. But yeah, let's like get back, usually my mother. But so being back in Washington was being like being back home. It really was. And I think I always knew that talking to lawmakers, they're people just like everybody else. Sure,
Yes.
they've exposed themselves, their families, their lives, every little scrap of information that can be found about them in order to be in elected office. But fundamentally, these are people, individuals, who are passionate about, believe it or not, even in these times, about making things better. And what I found is when I talk to them, um, we'll take a congressional representative who said, I'm not sure I know anybody who has Parkinson's. This was the first time that she and I met a couple of years ago, several years ago. The next time I saw her, she said, I can't believe it. My high school coach, my best friend, her father's got Parkinson's. It's everywhere around me. A US senator said to me, my mom got Parkinson's. Everybody knows somebody with Parkinson's. So I think that my my request really to the audience is be yourself. Tell your story. And what I found then is you establish a relationship with individuals and they tell you their story. And then you're able to build on that relationship. And you're not going to get them or the congressperson they work for to agree with you all the time, but they'll understand you and they'll think and weave that in to the work that they are trying to accomplish. I'll take New Mexico. We have a congressman in our state who comes from a district that depends a lot on agriculture. And this is true across many states. His period of time when he was on the city council, they banned glyphosate, which is used in agriculture.
Okay.
But the argument that prevailed was these are family farms for the most part, multi-generational. We want you and your family to be as safe and as healthy as possible. And we have alternatives to glyphosate. So it becomes this virtuous cycle where you're not saying to anybody that you can't keep your farm, you can't keep your livelihood. They're actually saying there's a better way to do it
Mm.
and a safer way. So that's part of what I love about times like we had at the policy forum. The second thing I have to just say, and I think we talked about it on the call the other day, I had never been in a room with so many people with Parkinson's,
Yes.
and they had so much energy. We had so much energy, and we kind of fortified each other, and we encouraged each other. We shared stories, and I thought, this is my people. These are my
Yes.
people. It was great.
Yes. There's something energizing about being around other people with Parkinson's, and a couple people said it out loud. It's really nice to be with people I don't have to explain myself to.
Right.
Don't have to explain the exhaustion. You don't have to explain the why I have to stop right
Sleep
now and take my medicine.
problems.
Sleep problems,
Right.
exactly. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
No, I
That's
thought
wonderful.
that was refreshing. And in fact, I said to my husband, well, you really are kind of, um, you don't fit the mold here because you're a care partner of someone with Parkinson's. But he actually has developed a phrase that I'll try out on you. He thinks he too has been diagnosed. His condition or his diagnosis is different. He has been diagnosed as a care partner of someone with Parkinson's. That is something that is very important to him. He identifies with it. I resisted it for a long time, to be quite honest. I'm like, no, you're my husband, and what are you talking about? I appreciate it now
Yes.
greatly, but we were just diagnosed with our conditions at different times.
Yes. I really like that actually. The amount of commitment and support from a care partner, and I have seen you and your husband together. You definitely are very blessed with a wonderful care partner. But that commitment, um, it to me, it's typified by I was also diagnosed, and that is a great way to express that. He may not have heard
Yeah.
from the doctor those words, but if you're committed to your partner and to being that care partner, then it is a joint diagnosis. I like that concept. I really do. It's kudos to him.
And and it does not have to be a spouse. To
No, it
be
doesn't.
quite
No.
honest, that sometimes it is a spouse, but other times it may be your best friend from high school, or it may be a sibling. One of the most active people in our community in Santa Fe, it was her best friend for
Mm,
decades who developed Parkinson's. And so remarkably, this person has stayed involved for years beyond what would have been her normal, shall we say, tour of duty.
mm,
Um, so, for the audience in particular, I would say don't assume it has to be this type or that type or another type. It can be, in fact, oftentimes it's someone who's not necessarily in your family.
yep. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I got to say about the Parkinson's Policy Forum in Washington, we just did an episode with season two. Episode one was a collective a recap of that. So if anybody wants a little more detail, you can check into that. But one thing I want to say again is that the unity that was there. There was four major foundations that were represented,
yeah.
but it really didn't matter. It was the whole point was that we are Parkinson's focused, and there was some 300 of us together, and to have
Right.
the final photograph taken on the steps of Capitol Hill, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. All those people coming together with one message, and a unified, I don't want to say attack, a unified front to go
Right.
into and request change was just so fantastic, and I loved it, and just such a wonderful experience for me. This was the first time I had been. Was that your first time too?
It was my first time.
Okay.
And I had heard about it from folks who had gone last year, and I was like, well, I wish I could have gone. But the other thing I would say to people who are listening is if you are invited to join that group, because they really do try and have representation from all 50 states and territories. And we found out only one state did not have a representative. That was North Dakota. But they also prepare you. You spend the first full day seeing, hearing lectures about why is it that the NIH funding needs to go up. Because it's really been stalled at about 325, $350 million. It needs to go up to 600. Why do we need to ban paraquat? And the data behind that, and that there are alternatives. Passage of the Healthy Brain Act is another big thing. And then really an overarching theme is back in, what was it, summer of 2024, there was passage of a national act to end Parkinson's. We are told that the advisory council for that group has been selected, that they're going through the vetting process of conflicts of interest and all that. But we're coming up on 2 years with no activity. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm getting impatient. My disease is not what it was 2 years ago. I have more of it. I need that act implemented. I need that plan activated. I need the money there for research. I need young scientists to think they have a future if they do the kind of research in Parkinson's that we want them to do. I'm not patient anymore.
I believe it was Dr. Oken that said the Parkinson's community is a little too patient, and I tend to agree. We're losing our patients, and I love the way you said that. 2 years ago, I was not the same patient because Parkinson's, for those
Right,
that don't know, is degenerative. There's no
right.
cure, and it gets worse over the course of time. Well, 2 years down the road, yes, our symptoms are worse, or conditions worse. So we really need an act. We need some action quickly. So very well put. Love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so have another question for you. Gonna take a little turn here on the road. Got a question for you.
Okay.
Okay, have you heard about the nose that tells the future?
The what?
Have you heard about the nose that can tell the future? That can
Only
fortune
with
tell?
Pinocchio, which
No,
is that
no.
his nose grew when he told a lie. But fill me in.
His name is Nostradamus.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
okay.
Okay, so that was pretty bad.
Oh,
Okay, Nostradamus. Okay, but there's a reason I ask you that question.
okay.
I know you, and you are a very committed and serious advocate, but you also have a sense of humor. Okay.
Well, yeah.
And so my question is, how would you say you use humor to to deal with Parkinson's or to deal with anything in life? What how do you use humor as a way to maybe fight back against the different things or difficult times that come up?
That is such an amazing question, Mark, because I was just talking with one of my closest friends, who I've known way back since medical school days, who also has Parkinson's. And we try and chat at least a couple times a month. And we laugh so hard during those conversations. And it's because there's always two sides, at least this is our perspective. There's two sides to the coin. And so sometimes bad things happen to good people. And then you say, well, it could have been worse, or I could have done something differently, or just whatever. Um, so humor is, I think it's absolutely essential. There was somebody, was it Norman Lear, who years ago wrote a book about humor and its life-saving powers. because he was sick in the hospital. He was, I think, mostly a producer for television and radio and movies. And he was so sick and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. But somebody came up with the idea of bringing in the wackiest, craziest, funniest shows so that he could watch them in his hotel room. And he said, I mean, he lived to, I think, age 100 or more. And he said that saved his life. So sometimes people say, and I'm realizing, I mean, you and I have been reasonably well, we've comported ourselves reasonably well on this interview, but I think if someone went back, you'd see sort of some of the little wacky things that we've said that make it easy to talk about the harder stuff. So I think you have to have both. I really do.
I totally agree. This became a subject for me when I was in Barcelona, Spain for the World Parkinson's Congress in 23.
Lucky you.
Yes,
Yes.
I very blessed to have been able to go. But I was talking to somebody that was there, and she actually lives in northern Spain. Her
Mm,
name's Anna. She's an amazing woman, uh, born or excuse me, I should say raised in London. So she has a British accent, but she also speaks Spanish. So
okay.
her Spanish has a British accent, which is funny. But anyways, um, getting back from there from the WPC, I came to a firestorm of activity in my personal life and lots of things going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Anna impressed upon me was the necessity to laugh, even when things are really tough. And she was saying, sometimes what she'll do is like the last thing in the day she does is pulls up comedy videos on her phone, so that she goes to bed with some humors, with some laugh and some
Levity.
positive
Right.
levity, exactly. And um, one of the things I struggle with in my Parkinson's journey the most is anxiety and panic attacks and depression. And
Right.
so I took that tip from her, and I that is a staple of my weekly activity now. I force my not force, but I mean I insert times dedicated for comedy, and
Yes.
and it's so important that I do that because having a like you said, I love that expression, two sides of a coin. I mean, I can focus on the dark side of the coin with Parkinson's all day long, and oftentimes I do. But you need that counterbalance. You need that moment of levity to say, you know what, I've always been an optimist, and so I like to see that optimistic point. And one of the things that I've mentioned this before, but one of the things I loved about the World Parkinson's Congress in Spain, you have all these top researchers, doctors, people from around the world, global leaders in Parkinson's.
Right.
But the one session that they blew out because they blew out the room was a comedy writer from the TV show Vicar Dibley, because
Oh,
so many
wow.
people wanted to attend that and hear him because he was so funny. And I thought, if this doesn't typify the Parkinson's community, I don't know what does. And I've mentioned this in other episodes, but to me, that is such a tip of the cap to the Parkinson's community. Like, yeah, okay, we care about a cure, we care about top research, we care about these things, but you know what? At the end of the day, we also want to laugh. And I'll tell you, that was
Right.
a great experience. So thank you for that honest answer. That
Well, I think about it because there are all these books that talk about the one thing that you can control is how you respond to the
yes,
circumstances that you find yourself in. And, Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning, is probably the most revered consideration of that. And so we could go around all day for the rest of our days feeling terrible. But I used to say to my patients, and this again is where I think having been a physician helped a lot, because they were dealing with big trouble. I mean, serious heart disease and facing operations and stuff like that. And sometimes there was that tendency to ruminate,
right.
and I I would hear them ruminating visit after visit, day after day. And I would say, "Okay, let's pause and think. As long as the ruminating is helping you get closer to feeling at peace, with what's going on. Have at it. Something good is going to come from it. I said, but if it really keeps ending you up in a bad place, shut off the movie. It's like, don't go there, because you've already seen the movie. You've seen how it works in your brain, and don't do it. And they'd look at me, whoa, like, I'm telling you, because even in my practice, the worst months of the year for a cardiologist were the winter months. People were sicker, more hospitalizations, more of my patients would pass on, they would die. And so that is the time of year my family knows that we would not watch unhappy movies. We would not read sad books or tragedies. And then maybe in the summer, we could start to do that again. But I think you have control over the dose that you take in every day of what affects your mood.
That's a great way to say it too. I have a good friend who's a mindset coach. She works with athletes,
Yeah.
and her comment to me was, again, because the whole sports tie in, you can't prevent yourself from getting hit, but how you respond to that hit, is up to
Yes.
you. And she talks to students or to athletes about their response to adversity in sports, and how do you get
Right.
that performance back up, right? And really, it applies to our everyday life in the sense of, again, I don't have no control over the fact that I have Parkinson's, but how I respond to it, or I have no control over the insurance issues I'm having trying to get things billed, or whatever. I have no control of those things. What I can do, though, is how I approach those things and how I let it affect me. Those are the things I can control. And it's really about a mindset. So thank you so much. That's great stuff.
Well, maybe I learned it from reading a book.
Mm,
And it talked about the great athletes and
mm,
how they had been evaluated. And one of
right.
the great golfers of all time, he was asked, so what do you think about after you've hit the ball and you're getting ready to go to the ball to hit it again? And he said, nothing. I'm thinking it's a nice day, it's a blue sky, the grass is green. He said, nothing. And then he said, but when I see the ball and I approach the ball, I focus. And I focus, I hit the ball, and then I'm back looking at the clouds. And I thought that was just, even if it was only a few minutes of peace and quiet, almost like a meditation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
All right. So this is the segment of the show I call Get to the Chopper.
Get to the chopper!
And so this is where it's the end of the movie. The credits are about to roll. We're up on the hillside waiting for the helicopters to come and extract us and take us home to family and friends. So I have to ask you, what's the one thing that you want our listeners to take away from the show today? What's the one thing you hope that they think about, or they follow up on, or the one thing that is most important to you?
I'm going to cheat two things. If
Oh,
you're interested, apply to the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council, deadline April 10. Number two, the only person who's in charge of your life or how you respond to your life is you. And so limit your pity parties and look at what you can do to laugh, to enjoy the life that you have.
absolutely. I I will say amen to that, and I will let those two be the answer for both of us, because your second response there, so important. And I give a tip of the cap to my mindset coach, who, if she
Yeah.
listens to this podcast, will know I'm tipping my hat to her about mindset. But also, to your point, if anybody's interested, April 10th, Parkinson's
Yeah,
Advisory
please.
Council, check into that. So, Kathy, as always, a wonder to talk to
Oh,
you. You are amazing. You're fantastic. You're a lot of fun. And I really appreciate the time, because I know you're a very busy person.
and you were right. The time flew by. So I hope that people watch this and enjoy it as much as we have. Thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you so much. And to my listeners out there, I just want to remind you, guys, life is not a destination. Life is a journey. So make sure you get out there and keep exploring. Take care, guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Love it.
Thanks for joining me on this edition of Mark in the Park, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps more people discover the show. For show notes, updates, and future episodes, or to connect, head over to markinthepark21.com. Got a guest idea or a topic suggestion? Drop me a line at markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And to all my listeners, this is Mark Milow reminding you, life is as much about the journey as the destination. So enjoy the sights and sounds along the way. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring.